Welcome everyone to Outdoor Educating from the Wealth Movement. I'm Dr. Stephen Hobbs. I am the founder of the Wealth Movement. And today we're going to take a look at the topics of instructive coaching. And we're going to have a sort of an unfolding of what is the connection between services and products and extraordinary experiences. And then we're going to take a look at the extraordinary experience characteristic called novel from this trigger, prompt, and reflection point of view that would add to your own practice as an outdoor educator, outdoor practitioner. And I'll close off with a little ceremony insight tip, whichever way you'd like to look at it, that's connected to walking, something that I do, and I thought that I would share it with you today. But I'd just like to also start off with the fact that you might have been looking in on some of the videos before and noticed I had a longer beard, and it's gone. I took it off. I was doing some filming the other day, and I noticed it was sort of all over the place, and I figured, I think I'll start this again and see what might happen. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. And also just to share with you, I'm looking out the window here, and it's snowing again. Okay, I live in Canada. I understand that Western Canada, but the walk this morning was just beautiful. It was around -2, 0, and Georgia and I, the dog that I walk with, we had a great time and put in our steps. And now I turn and it's snowing. So that's a weather report from Western Canada. So the point that I wanted to make around instructive coaching is it's under this banner of educating approaches that are available to you as an educator practitioner when you're interacting with your participants. And it doesn't really matter what it is that you are sharing with them, this notion of instructive coaching will be of assistance. Now, in the past video, last week, I talked about extraordinary experiences and facilitative mentoring. I'll put the link in the show more notes below, or you might see it pop up above here. And what is happening with this instructive coaching, it's sort of extending that video, coming at it from using a slightly different lens, adding more into the educating approaches that are available to you. And I'm going to start off with this notion of instructing, instruction. It was one of the very first ones that I learned and really became quite conversant in, I would say even quite competent in, because I did a lot of instructional work around canoeing and being in the outdoors and helping youth learn about the outdoors and getting them involved in canoe trips and forestry programs. And so instruction became sort of my middle name. And by that, I'm referring to this notion as it's a direct approach to share the concepts followed by the practices on topics that are related to a particular outcome. And I mentioned this notion of learning why and how to canoe, or learning why and how to hike, or learning how to and why to navigate safely in the outdoors if you're just getting to know it. So the instruction work was really about, okay, here's the concepts. These are why these concepts are important. Here's some skills that go with it. And then what we'll do is we'll do some of that practice as it follows along. And then I deepened all of this and truly understood that I was actually doing some coaching, and I'll get to that in a minute. Is my instructing was to get across the why linked to the how. My coaching was doing the how linked to the why. So where it really unfolded for me was when I was doing my wilderness remote first aid instruction. That's why we call this instructors, is because there was a lot of concepts had to be presented, and yet there was practices that had to be learned. But what we did is we created extraordinary experience weekends, and we would go out and share the practices that went with the concepts we learned during the week. And I got really great at this sort of combination of instructing and coaching. And it sort of unfolded in such a way that I really deepened my whole sense of what it means to be an outdoor educator, educating outdoor practitioner. So I've alluded to the coaching. So let me share this with you, and then I'm going to come back and look at a couple of examples so that I can share a little bit more here with you. From a coach perspective, what we're doing is we're asking questions of the participant so that we can get into the skill development. In the workplace, they talk about job performance. I'm sharing it from a perspective of participant becoming more skilled to develop their skills in whatever it is that they're learning. And therefore, it's towards some achieved or intended outcome. So let's go back to the notion of canoe. So learning how and why to canoe. So now we're into the how that's connected to the why. And it's a little bit more than just learning how and the why, it's knowing how to really have it become part of you. So learning the concepts, knowing the practices, it's to deepen your connection. And the same thing could be said for hiking or to navigate safely in the outdoors, is to know how to do that is when you start to lean into the world of coaching. And what I'm doing here is to sort of remind you is that this instructive coaching is a way in which to integrate the how and the why. When we get together next week, I'll be sharing some more information about training, consulting, shifting, and counseling to add more to this notion of the facilitated mentoring in today's instructive coaching. The the key here is let's go to an example of canoeing. And I was hired by a number of organizations over the years, parks and recreation departments, to do instructive canoeing and then to encourage the people to start canoeing. And so this is when I learned the coaching aspect of that. So when I'm doing my instructive work, I could be doing it into a group. And usually I had 5 to 10 people that were out with me, and I was doing the basic instruction before we actually got into the canoe. But once we got into the canoe, there was some instruction still happening, but there I found that I was doing more coaching because I would then interact with each individual, and each person was in a slightly different knowing about canoeing. Some just needed a little fine tuning. Others were starting right from the beginning and never heard of a J stroke or a draw stroke or anything like that. And so the instruction was there and the coaching was there and how I went back and forth. Now, I have to admit, when I first started, I didn't think about the coaching aspect that went with it. But now, as I've deepened up my practice, I'm hoping that the example I've given to you makes sense, is that there is this instruction and this coaching and they integration, they really help each other in terms of strengthening the experience that you're delivering for the people and how you organize it as well. Let me give you another example. When I'm doing the wilderness remote first aid instruction work, the coaching was there is because, as I mentioned, the instruction was done during the week and there was some practice. So I do a little bit of coaching, like learning actually how to do the CPR using mannequins. And on the weekend, it was very much about the skill development. And again, there was a bit of instruction, but it was coaching each person because of their approach to it. Some people got the first aid and got it really quickly, others didn't. But when I introduced something that was new to everyone, there was some instruction work that I would follow up with. And it was a concept called leadership management, it's administration, stewardship, and followership, LMASF. And it was a way in which to help people when they walk into a situation, how to get themselves organized, whether it's by themselves or they were with a group. And so there's still some instruction work I did during the week. But when we went to actually apply it, then I had to coach because certain people would get it, other people wouldn't, or be a little bit hesitant to get in there and take the lead role or to take the stewardship role, whatever it might be. So I would have to have individual coaching conversations with them to be able to get them to go, oh, okay, I see that, and to help them deepen their skill development as we move forward. So there is this notion of how do you use both this instruction and this coaching to be able to set up the entry, the involvement of what's happening, the exit that's coming out, so that you could really connect with the participants. So a little bit later in one of the videos to share that I'll share on another Saturday, I'll go over the notion of briefing and debriefing and some of the steps that you can take so you know how to brief into and to debrief out of. So that will be another time. But this notion here is that this instructive coaching and what I'm sharing with you isn't so absolute as to hold it exactly as I'm sharing, because it does move. They do integrate. They do interact with one another. But I wanted to give you a sense of it so that you can sort of make your own decisions about how you want to use both of these, and then even link them to the facilitative mentoring and see what you might be able to do. So, as a bit of a summary point here, is that I tend to instruct the participants and I coach the participant. It was a way in which it helps me to understand, so I know where I am in my assistance to the person and to the persons who are before me, and to know which one I'm moving in and out of. Because I found that what it did was it just strengthened, it focused, it improved my practice, but also my interactions with the participants, because they felt like, oh yeah, I'm part of a group, but at the same time, I'm taking care of an individual attention and intention, and sort of connecting to my own hierarchy of values as a participant in this. Because from a canoeing point of view, some were just recreational, some were learning because they were going to go on a canoe trip. Some were saying, well, I'm thinking that I'm going to actually learn the canoeing because I'm going to get involved with a summer camp. So again, each person had their own view of the outcome, but they were all there learning the canoeing, and how was it that I could interact with them, whether I instructed or whether I was coaching them. So I'm hoping that gives you a bit of an idea of how those two come together. So I want to now just drop into another topic which connects with the extraordinary experiences in last week's video, and it's to connect with products and services. Now, when I think of products, I'm thinking about, those tangible aspects that you can work with, that you can give to people. And sometimes when you're doing some instruction and coaching work, you might give a person an actual handout that they might be able to follow along. So that has that sort of tangible, but also you might do some pre-work where you get them an ebook or a journal or a notebook or a workbook, and they have access to that. And these are the products. They tend to be tangibles, even though I know ebooks are intangible. I'm just putting them together as a way in which to say, okay, here's what you're giving to people as support material to be able to make this all work. Now, the other thing that I would add to this is like a video like this one, which goes over a lot more of the concepts than the practices, even though videos that will be coming along later, I will be doing some deeper practice, more about the knowing how to the why versus these concepts of learning the why to the how. So they will be there for you as well, and as time goes by. But let's just take a look at the services component, and then I'll connect it to extraordinary experiences. The services aspect, I think of those a bit more of the intangibles. All right. And what you might be able to do is provide actual like one-to-one mentoring for people or coaching one-to-one. Sometimes people reach out to me and say, hey, I'd like to interact with you, connect with you so that I can learn about the outdoors. Do you do one-to-one mentoring or coaching? And I say, yes, I do, but there's others that I recommend them on to because I think that they can do a much better job, because I tend to be more of rather than a business to customer from that sort of one-to-one, I'm tending to be more business to business, where I'm interacting with you because you have a business, or you're going to be employed in a business kind of idea. So with this idea of the services and more intangibles, I also link into there is like online courses. I have online courses that I provide, and they're available. But there is also, remember I talked about the instruction and coaching of like how to canoe, how to hike, how to be in the outdoors safely. But you do it in the notion of a group, and you're doing it face to face. You're doing it outdoors. You may have the inside to outside because you have to have that happen. There was many years where I was involved in the Parks and Recreation program about introducing people to the outdoors, and I did the wilderness remote first aid. I did the group dynamics, and I did communication, how to set up the communication so that you could conserve the time, effort, and energy in the group, and no one would get hurt. So how do you communicate in that, using things like listening and consciously sharing with one another. So those were the three courses then. I think there was another 3 or 4 that made up a little certificate that the Parks and Recreation gave out. So I always enjoyed those, but those are what I would call services that I would be involved with. And the service of the videos that are practice based, I mentioned these earlier. They could be more of a service than a product. Again, it just depends how you present them to your participants. The the other thing is this notion of instructing and training lends a little bit more into the services aspect as well. But here's something that I believe is really of value to you. Now, this is me for you, suggestion, recommendation, to think about this notion of extraordinary experiences, services, and products. If you think of it this way, sometimes or often a product like a book can become a service like a course, online course, in the out of doors course, and to be able to then create the extraordinary experience that goes around that. So the person could buy the book, they could attend this course, and then they could get involved in this extraordinary experience. So let me give you an example. Maybe there's a book that you've created about the outdoors and walking. And what people can do is come and attend a walking program with you where you do some instructive coaching and maybe even some facilitative mentoring, depending if it's a whole group or it's a cohort group. And yet they want to say, well, can we actually do more with you and experience? You may say, well, look, I'll set up a walking weekend. And what we'll do is we'll learn about this, and then I'll get you to do some instruction coaching with the group so you can deepen your own practice. But yet it's a weekend where we have some fun together. And that's how the way to do it. So that extraordinary experience could have the feeling of a weekend away. It could be a retreat, and how you've nested them inside each other. So guess what? You could do it in the other way as well. As you might say, well, I'd like to create a retreat based on walking, and maybe what we might do is incorporate um, learning about some of the base skills about like how to light a fire, some of the bushcraft, but also writing poetry and journaling. And you might go, okay, that's great. So what services do I want to offer in that retreat, but also getting people ready for it? So you might create a little online course of how to enter in and get ready to go, the instructive coaching during the time you're in the retreat. But guess what? Remember I mentioned about the journaling? You could actually create a journal and publish it on Amazon in the KDP area. And again, that might be something we can learn about together a little bit later. It's one of the things that I do. I create journals and I put them up. So, or I provide them through my store on my website. So the notion is that you can do extraordinary experiences to services to products. You could create a product to services to extraordinary experiences. They're nested in each other. It's a little bit like another term you could talk about in terms of instructive coaching, could be nested inside of facilitated mentoring and vice versa. Again, it's this notion of a lot with when you're in business is how do I innovate this notion of programs and projects? Well, it comes through the integration of the notion of these products, services, and experiences that you bring together. So I'm hoping that that gives you some sense about how these connect. And if you take the last week's video and this week's video, so that would be the notion of April the 2nd with the April the 9th, which is today's, and you watch both of them, you can get a sense of the extraordinary experiences, the products and services conversation. So now it's time to move over into with extraordinary experiences and the notion services and products, there are some key concepts that I'm bringing to your attention. Last week was the notion of consequential. And today I'm going to take a look at novel. Is the experience that you're creating novel? And what I'm getting at here is the sense of is it original? Is it fresh? Is it imaginative in the sharing the experience? And to be able to set that up for us, I want to also remind you, I look at it from a point of view of a trigger, a prompt, and a reflection. And so this is for you as adult outdoor educators. You can use it with the children, youth as well, uh, and the practitioners. And the notion is when you're thinking about the delivery, the organization and delivery of this, is it novel, or are you just sort of pulling a routine off the shelf, just do it? Okay, I've done what I need to do. Thanks very much. Goodbye. Or is it novel? Wow. Okay. What is it that I might be able to do some variations so it keeps it fresh for me? So the notion of the trigger and the prompt, I just like to share with you. The trigger is sort of like a mental spark to draw your attention to something. So it triggers. Okay, wow, that was really neat. That word that you just shared, that image that you're asking us to look at, it sort of triggers, sparks something in me, and it sparks a bit of a conversation. Now the conversation could be a hinder or help. So that's possible. But what it does sometimes, it will prompt that trigger might prompt a behavior or an emotional response. Sometimes it can actually get hijacked, or it may be, oh, geez, I'm feeling a little sad now. And this notion of that trigger to prompt, and it could be again from a hinder or help perspective. And this will lead you to, okay, so I'm picking up on the trigger and the prompt for this person might be slightly different than that person. So from a reflection point of view, what might I do to be able to help out both of them if I'm using facilitated mentoring or instructive coaching at this point in time? And what you're doing is you're saying, which of these educating approaches will I use that will be correct for that situation in which this trigger and prompt has taken place. So let me give you an example here. What you might be doing is you might be having an awesome a day out learning about canoeing and practicing the canoeing on a local pond. And it's lunchtime, and you find that someone starts to talk about a topic that may not necessarily be fully linked to the canoeing, but you know that it may not be a great conversation because it might have to do with politics, it might have to do an environmental issue, and it might actually stir up something in people's lives. It might trigger and then get a prompt. And you're going to go, well, hang on a minute. I want to encourage the novel aspect of the canoeing and the program that's here, but I don't want to get something where a new novel aspect that may actually hinder, okay? And you might go, well, how am I going to avoid talking about politics or an environmental issue, okay, that could lead us down a little bit of a rabbit hole? So you want to pay attention to that and say, okay, how am I going to do that? And often it's to head it off at the beginning if you can, and be able to redirect the conversation, or be really alert to how you say things that you don't want to get things started up and go, well, the canoeing program that we offer is a great way to be able to learn more about this environmental issue because you can go down the waterways and look at it. And you might go, okay, would that be a hinder for some people? But in some cases, you bringing it up and sharing it, it may be a very great help because it may draw attention more to their use of canoeing as a way in which to get to know the out of doors. So again, the source, sometimes when it comes out of the participants, and the trigger prompt may get you looking at something that could be a novel topic to talk about, but because it's hindering, it'd be better not to go down that pathway. But you may take a look at that topic and novel from a different perspective. You bring it out, and how do you direct it so that it would be of help to people? So again, is just really paying attention to how does your novel experience you've created, what might happen amongst the participants that might take it down a rabbit hole, on put it on a sidetrack. We use a railway example, and just really paying attention to it, which means you're always having to reflect on where you are, what the conversation is happening, and does that conversation contribute to the novelty of what they're doing, or would that conversation detract, take people down rabbit holes? So you want to really look at that and be alert to it so that it doesn't get you off and down some rabbit holes or into some place you just don't want to go to. Okay. So again, pay attention to what's happening there. So the notion here is, when you're sharing stories, you're sharing examples. Is that example that you're going to use going to help, or is it going to hinder? And you really have to pay attention to that, because stories are so powerful, and you want to be able to know if they're contributing or not. Now, the last piece that I would share with you here is conversations that I've been hinting at. This notion of the trigger prompt. What we're doing is we're touching into the world of beliefs and assumptions and opinions and perceptions. And each person has those, but they may not want to share them or be encouraged to look at them in the activity they're involved with. So again, that's why when you look at what you're going to talk about, really just understand, all right, is it going to prompt trigger this notion of beliefs and assumptions, opinions, or perceptions? And just understand that, okay? Because you don't want to have someone go into a behavior where the sense of their amygdala, this notion of the emotions hijacks what they're doing, and a behavior comes out that could be detrimental to the person, but also to the group. So I think I've covered off enough here to really give you a sense of, okay, you want to create novel experiences, but be alert to what's happening around the novelty of that, especially from a conversational point of view, the topics that you talk about and how you link them to the activity that you're involved with. Now, I will say as an example, maybe you're out walking and it is to deal with an environmental issue. And I'm thinking about, okay, like this morning I was walking and I was picking up masks that had blown away or people had just thrown away. And I found them on the ground or up against trees or in some fields that I was walking through, and I was picking them up. So you could go on a walk and say, well, what kind of garbage are we finding out here? And what might happen if that garbage got around the neck of an animal, or that got into a waterway? What would be examples? Now, again, at that point in time, everyone knows they're walking into a conversation like that, and it will prompt possibly triggers about beliefs and assumptions and perceptions and opinions, and which may bring out behaviors or conversations that might get you down rabbit holes. That's what you want to have happen. So I just want to use that example as well, not to close that off as not being able to happen for you. Okay, so let's take a look at something else. And this is the idea of what I call a walking ceremony. So each time I go into the outer doors, there is a ceremony of entry and the ceremony of exit. And today, the ceremony that I used on my walk with Georgia was the ceremony of walk over the roots. In other words, walk in such a way is that you don't step on the roots of the trees in the path. I sort of I liken the exposed roots, or sort of if you were to take your dance partner onto the dance floor and you stepped all over their feet, it isn't a pleasant experience. And so, from a tree point of view, it's enough that their branches, their roots have been exposed because of walking along the paths. We don't have to step on the roots. And I was reminded of this a couple of times, but this morning again it happened. Is that just before I entered in to start my walk along the path in the trees rather than from the road that I just came from, a runner came along and had his headlamp on, shining down, and running along. And I sort of went, hang on a minute. When you're running, it's not as easy to miss those roots. Cycling, you're not going to miss the roots for the most part. Okay. And I just went walking, running, cycling, ways in which to do the same path, and what might that bring out for you. And that's when I said, well, I think the ceremony of walk over the roots is what I'm going to do today. And I did my best to have that happen. And I did notice a couple of times I stepped on the roots. There was one time the root actually caught the tip of my boot, and it's sort of like I scuffed it, and I had to smile to myself. I thought maybe that root just went a little higher. I don't know if that's true or not, but it just I had a little bit of a laugh with that tree, and I said thank you, and I kept walking along. So the ceremony of entering in, paying attention, your involvement as you're walking, and as you exit, sort of saying thank you, and just acknowledging, did I or did I not step on the roots. Now, the other thing that's interesting there is that as I was walking along, I had to go, hang on a minute. I can't have my head down all the time because I may not see what's coming or what's around me. So I had to develop a way of looking down and knowing where I was, but at the same time, safely walking so I didn't walk into branches or see something else that was coming, and or losing Georgia because of something that she saw in the bush and which may not have been there. So I still had to pay attention. So I'm not saying I was multitasking, even though there's probably an element there. But what I was doing is more as I was attending to the situation from a safe perspective while still enjoying what I was doing and holding the ceremony. So I offer that to you as just another way to look at a way to experience the outdoors. It's a service you did from yourself. I wouldn't necessarily link it to a product at this point in time, other than if you want to look at it from the perspective of me sharing it with you at the moment through this video. that's that's an idea. So that's the ceremony of walking, and I'm thinking what I'll do is each Saturday morning when I'm sharing the video with you, I'll include a different ceremony and see what you think. And again, I would encourage if you have an edit and add, alter, delete to the ceremony, please share away. And if you want to add a ceremony, please put it down. And I certainly encourage you to subscribe to the channel so that you know when it's coming forward. And a reminder, again, that's when if you ring the bell. But please subscribe because it just helps to get this video series that I have up and getting noticed more in the YouTube algorithm. So that's a big call to action that I ask of you. So I think we're getting to the point of close up. So again, the topics I covered off today was instructive coaching, followed by products and services linked to extraordinary experiences. I went over the novel characteristic of extraordinary experiences and shared with you a little bit from the perspective of triggers, prompts, and the reflections for you as an outdoor educator, outdoor practitioner, and then the walking ceremony. So it's great to share this with you and have that opportunity, because there is something that I've learned over the years as you educate what you love to learn. And when you do, you improve focus and strengthen your own practice because you learn the concepts because you have to, okay, how do I put them together? And then being able to share them, educate others is a way in which to practice your educating approach. So I'm hoping today you even saw the instruction aspect and a little bit of the coaching aspect in this video. So with that, I'm just going to wish you the best. Have a great rest of the weekend. And if you pick this up tomorrow or a week from now, or even a month from now, a year from now, always enjoy what it is that you're doing in all the ways that are possible. So with that, take care.